Welcome to Live Your Life Out Loud podcast. I am your host, Stefanie Thayer. This is a place for tired and overwhelmed women to gather together. Whether you are seeking or already following God, I aim to bring hope, fulfillment, and purpose to your life. So let's dig in. So today's episode is going to be a little bit different than the typical conversation. My family has been greatly impacted by the Palisades Fire. And about a week ago, I went live in my personal Facebook page and I just shared some stories, my heart, the history, the shame of just what's going on. And so I am going to insert that recording here as an episode for you. So I hope that it's insightful. It brings you some clarity around some of the dynamics and things of fires in California and just that area. And most importantly, just a reminder to pray for all those impacted. It's so easy for us to look at the news and see horrific things, not just this fire. There's so many catastrophes that have been happening lately. New Orleans, Helene that went through Florida and North Carolina. There's just so many things that I think sometimes we get desensitized. And the reality is each of these stories are real people, really impacted. And so just a reminder that prayer is so powerful. It's something all of us can do at any time. And it's such a great gift to offer to other people. Good morning. I just worked out, so this is the hair that you get. I haven't gone live in a long time. I'm going to sit on the floor and back up here. So, I wanted to get on and talk a little bit about the Palisades Fire and just talk about the Palisades, my experience there, my family there, kind of some of the consequences of this for folks and just fires in general. So, I was born in Santa Monica. A lot of people know Santa Monica. It's pretty famous. 3rd Street Promenade, the pier, all that. And a lot of people know Malibu. Malibu is the very edge of LA County. There's this tiny little sweet hidden gem of a town right between the two of them called Pacific Palisades, okay? So Santa Monica, Pacific Palisades, Malibu. Malibu is like, I think 26 miles of ocean. It's huge and it goes way back. Most of Malibu is complete country. Most of Malibu is ranches. And when you get to the top, if you split through the middle of the ocean at Malibu up Topanga Canyon, which is like the coolest, hippiest place you've ever been to, where my aunt used to keep her horses, that is also right on the line right now. I'm just praying for Topanga. You get to Calabasas, which is more in the valley. It's called the Valley. And there's a big difference between the ocean side of LA people and the valley people. The valley actually gets quite hot. The ocean is the ocean, right? So Pacific Palisades, you can hit from the 405 coming in. If you exit the 405 at sunset, if you were to go, I don't know, I guess it's east, you hit UCLA, okay? If you go west, I would always call it the racetrack as a kid, and you go through and it's super windy and it gets you down to Pacific Coast Highway. It's just this little gem. And actually there's a lot of also horses there, Will Rogers, like a ton of famous people live there. I'm not going to say who all of them they are. Like some of them, you know, their homes, but a lot of them have deals with the paparazzi to say that they live in Brentwood or Westwood or Santa Monica or different places. And yet the image they'll show is like their church in the Palisades or whatever. And so I would see them all the time growing up. So I was born there. When I was 2, my parents decided that they did not want to raise me in Southern California. It had gotten much busier, much more money focused, and they wanted to raise me in the country, which, thank you parents. So I grew up in Northern California between Sacramento and Tahoe, right? So my parents actually lived in Venice. They were total hippies. They had a Volkswagen bus, true story, okay? And so Venice is on the other side of Santa Monica, where you could see all like the street vendors and the skate parking, and like it's crazy down there. Muscle Beach, that's in Venice. So it goes Venice, Santa Monica, Pacific Palisades, Malibu. Anyway, my parents didn't know because they didn't meet till they were older, but they actually were, when they were toddler and born, had a fence line that was back to back in the Palisades, which was in the neighborhood called the Alphabet Streets. If you look it up, almost all of that is burned down. They aren't actually alphabets. It's not like ABC, but that's what it's called, is the Alphabet Streets. It's the sweetest neighborhood. It's decimated. One of my grandparents lived in Santa Monica. The other grandparents lived in the Palisades. The particular area that they lived in, they owned that home 60, 70, 80, 91, for 60 years. Until my grandfather passed away, and then my dad lived there a couple years more. It's like this little time capsule, mid-century modern, sold it to the most amazing couple who are professional musicians, and they have preserved the home. They added a little bit, but it is like it is. It's at the very end of this particular neighborhood, which is the backside of the brush, the Santa Monica Mountains. A lot of people think of LA just as, I'm sorry if you hear my voice, I'm emotional. A lot of people think of LA as like the city, and you see Hollywood and the squares and all that, and that's true, but this area is not like that at all. So behind my grandparents is complete, just open, is the trails. We would go hike it. Where the fire started is in a part of those trail systems. It's a little bit higher up Palisades Drive, which is a one-way road in, one-way road out, and it's like this. So those of you that lived in Northern California, so the year I moved to Georgia, 19 of my friends from high school lost their homes in, I forget the fire, in 2021 in the Sierras. And then now, like everywhere where I grew up and would go watch the fireworks and my grandparents and everything, I'm pretty sure my grandparents' home is gone, but I'm not positive. So they're at the backside of this amazing neighborhood that's right on the water. And my aunt on my other side of the family, who, if any of you knew my Aunt Mady, like, she's an angel in my life. She's one of the main reasons I turned out okay. She loved that neighborhood, and she learned about that neighborhood because of my grandparents on my dad's side. And so she bought a home that's literally almost over the cliffs to the water. And depending on, I don't want to say exactly where she lives, but depending on where the news outlets are, I can see some of her neighbors' homes. I can see what's standing and what's not, right? So they got a warning at 10:30. Luckily, someone up in the Palisades saw it. She had an evacuation order by like 12:15. So within 5 minutes, she was in the car with her dog. Her dogs are her children, and thank God she got out safe, and people literally could not get out. So where you see cars abandoned, that's those people coming down Palisades Drive. That's a one-way in, one-way out. Absolutely beautiful. It's a little more remote, completely surrounded by brush, right? They have the views out to the ocean. My aunt was able to sneak out to her property. I'm not even going to tell you how she did it, but it's the funniest story, but I'm so proud of her, and I wish she would have videoed it. But her and one of her neighbors went out there, and my aunt is a very stoic woman. She is very structured, a go-getter, a no-nonsenser, and she was very emotional, and it makes me very emotional. Her house is completely untouched. Like, her bougainvillea, which is overgrown to the neighbor's house, she'd asked the gardeners to trim it 2 weeks ago, like cut it way back. They hadn't done it. It's not touched, you guys. Her fence with her pretty little tile thing, not touched. The house, not touched. She closed up her windows. She always has her windows open because you can hear the ocean and you can see the ocean. She closed them up. Almost no smoke smell. That is unheard of. Her back fence, and she probably has the tiniest house in this neighborhood. They're all on the cliffs, so they're like above and below each other and all around. A lot of the homes are from the 1920s. Hers is from the 1950s. The house directly behind her was smoldering when she was there. Gone. Completely gone. I would say her home's between 2 streets, so she can access it from the front and back. The front, most of them are fine, and they literally are like over the cliff to the ocean, like with the highway. The ones behind her, the majority are gone. Like a 1920s house Stevie Nicks used to live in, completely gone. Like these historical homes, they're decimated. And it's not done. It's not done. So a lot of people, I think, are seeing other things and moving on. Last night, It's moving higher up Pacific Palisades. They're getting evacuation orders into Brentwood. It's going towards the 405, you guys. That is a huge amount of space. It's gone way into the Santa Monica Mountains, so way up Palisades, way into Malibu. It's threatening Topanga. Topanga is the coolest little hippiest place, like I told you. Look up the Topanga General Store. Okay, you are gonna love it. You're gonna be so blessed. Like, technically they're in Malibu. They don't like to be called Malibu people because they are just like, they live off the land. They have ranches there. They are full hippies. They're amazing people. I just hiked out there in October with my aunt, and towards Calabasas. So it's heading towards the valley, which is very, very dense population. They're estimating probably 75% of the Palisades is burned down. The oldest, most historical building in town is gone. The library I went to as a child, my great uncle lived right next to it, taught me how to make popovers, gone. The little park that they had this playground that was like 3 stories, you know, with the little like castle thing at the top. My grandmother had to come save me from it because I was afraid of heights and refused to get down from it when I was like 6. My children have all gone and played in that playground. My brother and I did sports camps in that playground, gone. It will never look the same. So even though my aunt's house appears to be perfectly fine by the grace of God, it is not okay. The Getty Villa. Okay, so there's been a lot of stuff about the Getty that's totally misrepresented. My dad grew up on this hill, okay? The Getty Villa is a home that J. Paul Getty had. He had lots of homes. He didn't visit it that often. He also has a Getty Museum. Oh no, I just got an alert that it's progressing the ridge into Northridge. See, you guys, this is really bad. It's going towards very dense populated areas. So my dad, okay, so the Getty Villa is the historical home. The Getty Museum was newer. It's by the 405. The fire is actually heading that way right now. That's a new building. It's fancy. The Getty Villa, you guys, is like the coolest grounds you've ever seen. It has this long Roman pool. And so always in my mind, I was going to have a long Roman pool like that when I grew up. I have been to that villa over and over. It used to be open to the public until they built the Getty Museum. Now you have to have a special invite, or if you live in that neighborhood that my family lives in, you have a pass, you can go. They had gardens that are some of the most beautiful gardens you've ever seen. Olive trees, hundreds of years old. They have a whole garden that like replicates Italy. The villa is protected. There are photos up showing the villa sign and a house that it's on fire. Well, the hillside's on fire. And the house that it's showing is not the Getty Villa. We call that the castle. That house actually is used for events. Lady Gaga's Paparazzi was filmed in there. Lots of really cool things. It's a stone home, by the way, so fares pretty well for fires. So the Getty Villa is actually tucked way back. Getty was a really generous man. He actually donated some of that land to some churches that asked him. So things around him had been sold off. My dad was really good friends with the groundskeeper's son growing up. He run amok. Getty had a partial zoo on the property. He had a lot of exotic large animals. My dad's like, I don't know how we didn't get eaten alive. We would go down there all the time. Not supposed to, by the way, running around. So some of the property on the villa has been damaged. And just for all you conspiracy theorists, I have asked my dad, like, okay, are there tunnels under the Getty? Like, we've heard about kid trafficking. He's like, no, all of that is complete garbage. So just, you know, like, I know all these places, okay? So the Getty Villa is perfectly fine. It has taken land damage, but the villa itself, which if you ever get the opportunity, the most beautiful architecture, they do have quite a few of the art pieces there, but it's very minimal compared to what's now at the Getty Museum. So lots of misinformation. Okay. I don't want to get political. I can just tell you, regardless of politics, there were not fires common in California when I grew up. There was a huge one in the Sierras in the late 80s. And I remember it was really weird because you drive up to Tahoe and you would see the singe. Part of that is that we've had less rainfall. Part of that is absolute gross negligence of management of the forest system. So a lot of people think California is just like city. The majority of it is country. massive forest, lots of produce comes from there. I think it was in the 60s, my dates might be wrong, but my numbers are correct. We would mill I think it was 6 million whatever tons of lumber. Now we do 1.5 million. So because of a lot of environmentalists, regulations, whatever, the amount of clearing and cleanup that is even allowed is a fourth of what it used to be. We don't have the water infrastructure that we need. So the irony of California is they get flooding and then we have droughts because we're not saving the water. And I could get into lots of things. Somebody privately owns most of the water, which was against the law. So how did that happen? I just have so many questions. With that said, California has been devastated by fires. The community I ended up growing up in Northern California, we have had multiple rounds of devastating fires. That the year that I moved to Georgia, 2021, my mother was evacuated, my father was evacuated. That's the year I had 19 friends lose their homes. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And then here, this is happening too. And you know what? They're all talking about it and they're doing nothing to change it. In 2015, we voted $2.5 billion as Californians for more infrastructure and for it to go to that. Not a penny has gone to it. Not a penny. So yes, wildfires happen, but would these fires have happened and would they have happened in this amount? It's just, there's so much negligence and I don't know at what point it's going to stop. And in the meantime, there's people's lives who are totally ruined. So let's talk about the insurance issue. Let's just talk about the funding issue. So I'm hearing a lot of people like, oh, it doesn't matter if they're all rich. They're not all rich. Pacific Palisades is very much a retirement community. It's 35 to 40% that are old. And by old, I mean 80, 90 years old. Okay. That would have been my grandparents. They've lived there their whole lives. My grandparents bought that home for less than $50,000 in 1953. These are the people we're talking about. So just so you know, California has regulation on, thank God, or nobody could live there, on property taxes and how much they increase. So my grandparents paid taxes on a home that was worth $50,000 for their whole life, right? Or it goes up a tiny bit, but essentially that's what we're talking about. If they were alive today and their house burned down, okay, they passed away a few years ago, but I think the house did burn down. I have to check. It's worth millions and millions of dollars. Okay. So you have 2 years to transfer one time in your life that tax cost basis to another home. So let's say they decided, gosh, this house is too much for us. They could have sold it, moved somewhere else, and kept that tax basis. Well, when your house burns down in California, there's so much regulation. Go listen to Jillian Michaels talk about her house burning down in Malibu. I think it was in 2020. She could not get a permit for over a year to remove any of the debris, any of the burn, any of what was in the pool. She could not rebuild for years. And if you have the Ocean Commission, whatever they're called, involved, years. Like the joke in Malibu is you want to build a house, it takes 7 years to get approved. And it's a joke, but it's not. It's the truth. So what will happen with those people that had their house burned down? You can't transfer that tax, which was at the $50,000 because you've lived in your home 60 years, to the house that's going to get rebuilt because it's not rebuilt. So if they could ever rebuild in their community, which will cost millions of dollars because the cost of living in California is very high. So yes, the land is worth the most there, but just having a home rebuilt is very, very expensive. Now, let's say my grandparents' house was really large, actually, for the time, for the 50s. It was like 2,300 square feet, but they had grandparents living in the home too. So let's say that would cost $1.5 million to build. So now my grandparents' tax would go from $500 a year to $15,000 a year. They can't live there, right? So keep that in mind. Also, the majority of people living in California in high-risk areas have been canceled by insurance companies. This is across California. You pretty much can't get, is it public? Whatever, regular insurance, like State Farm, Farmers, all those people, okay? A whole bunch were canceled in December. You're thinking, whatever, they find an alternative, right? California had a great plan. It's called the California Fair Plan. It's what my aunt's on. Well, it maxes out at $3 million. So if your house is worth more than $3 million, you can't have the California Fair Plan. I hate to tell you this, pretty much any home in Pacific Palisades is worth more than $3 million. That does not mean they bought it for $3 million. The number one wealth building activity you can do in your life is buy a home. These people happened to buy a home years ago in a place that became a very coveted area. That is their nest egg. That is their number one nest egg. A lot of these elderly have reverse mortgages against that so they can live off of it and not leave. Do you hear what I'm saying? Like, it breaks my heart. So all these people were canceled in December and there's no solution for them. And this insurance problem is also coming to Florida, by the way, if it's not already there, right? So just for you to have some perspective of what this looks like for all of these people. Also, I think that Palisades is 20,000 people. Okay, let's say 75% of it's gone. So 15,000 people, so let's say 10,000 homes need to be rebuilt. Just imagine how long that is going to take. So I just want you guys to wrap around the totality of it and then add to it. There are multiple other fires going on right now. The Eaton fire, I don't know, the Sunset one broke out for a little bit. Sounds like I just got an alert when I was on here. It's going towards Northridge. It's going up to Mulholland. Mulholland's in Hollywood Hills, you guys, which also, I know everybody thinks of like Hollywood and like where you see the stars. The Hollywood Hills is called the hills for a reason. There's people that have these amazing, beautiful homes that are literally like off the hill, right? With the views. So number one, pray for people. One of the things my aunt said was in 30 hours, she feels like she's lived a year. And it's so true. So just their hearts, right? Safety for the people, safety for the animals. I don't know if you guys have seen the wildlife coming out of there, like owls and foxes. There's donkeys everywhere. People let their wildlife out. Like there's these beautiful, very expensive Arabian horses like running around because you just have to let them out and be free, right? Just for people, for their hearts right now, for safety for them, for protection for the first responders. I have so many friends from Northern California that are fire that have gone down there. I know people from other states that have gone down there. Bless you and thank you for that. That is such a risky and very selfless position. And I know in the South, a lot of people don't understand the role of a firefighter in the South is quite different than a role in California. So let me share a little bit. Every California firefighter is a paramedic. Some may be grandfathered in that are EMT. That's why I hesitated a little bit, but you have to be a paramedic. So in California, usually the first responders are the fire trucks. They essentially are a mobile ambulance as well, and an ambulance will follow behind. So they're highly skilled. They're usually the first on accidents, even before highway patrol. They're always first to fire, and they put their lives at risk. And a lot of these guys have serious PTSD, right? Just like our military and our officers and all that. I'm not negating other first responders. But what they arrive upon is really, really high risk. What I've noticed in the South is they're not paramedics. So they may stabilize, but they're not dealing with medical in the same way, right? You have a completely separate medical team that is going and is a completely different law enforcement. And so if I'm wrong for some of you, you can correct me. It's totally fine. But so they wear many, many hats when they go in these fires. I homeschooled my kids, if you don't know that. We've done a lot of really cool science camps in our life. And I say we because I got to do them too. So Yosemite does these ones, and we've done them in the winter. We've done them in the summer. And we had a wildlife biologist, coolest major, by the way, who was experimenting with his curriculum because our kids were really, really advanced in science. And so he was creating a curriculum on fires and how fires work, and he demonstrated it to us with little matches and different things and had the kids control and do different stuff. What has happened with these fires in California, because the clearing has not been allowed, basically what really causes the fires is the low brush and the dryness, right? There's no humidity right now. There are huge Santa Ana winds, like the worst they've seen since 2011. And so that combo is basically everything at the bottom 3 feet is kindling. It's just ripe for the picking. Normally, you would clear that, right? So people on their property are clearing it and keeping it trimmed. But if on the hillside above you, that's state property, they're not touching it because there's regulations and things around it. Well, that's just kindling. And one of the things that this wildlife biologist, his name was Matt, I remember him well, taught us was that, well, lots of things, but usually you have a first forest, and when it burns, you get a second forest. The second forest is a different type of tree that grows up. I can actually see it on my property because I can tell where the first forest trees are and then where the second ones are, where a prior owner had cut back, and now we have a different type of tree growing up. So notice that around property, you will see that. Fires are actually really good for regrowth in the earth. The Native Americans in Yosemite, in the valley floor, would actually cause somewhat controlled fires because the oak trees needed them to reproduce, and they would grind up the acorns to eat, right? So even people living completely off the land that you would think didn't have the science and technology, they knew what they were doing. They also knew if they had smaller segments of fire, it prevented this large fire. Well, what has happened now that Matt taught us is because we have not been able to do the mitigation things, it's creating what he called a super fire. It's creating its own weather pattern, which we have not seen kind of since we've been documenting fires. And so you're seeing that with all these ones over California. I would say the last 7 or 8 years, these all kind of fit that description. And it creates its own weather. And so what you're seeing with this, there is some arson going on, but some of these embers are just taking flight and they're going 2 miles away. And guess what? When it lands, it's kindling down there. It's just ripe for the picking. Boom, right? And so it's created just this chaos from a weather pattern that we shouldn't be seeing. I don't know what else I should say. There are a lot of famous people that live there. I've met many of them. They're just normal people like you and me, you guys. And a lot of people you see on TV don't have the money you think they do. There's a lot of just normal, really sweet people. Like my favorite cafe I've gone to since I was a tiny little kid, Cafe Vita. It's a few Hispanic families that own it. And I actually told the waiter the last time I was there, like, do you ever meet people that you could tell they just love their job so much and they do it with excellence, and maybe their job isn't like a high profile job and maybe they're not recognized. This guy, he does waitering, which he doesn't need to. He's the owner and he loves on everyone everywhere he goes. And I just complimented him and talked to him about that. They lost everything. It's people like that, you guys, that have lost everything. Like the elementary school my dad went to is gone. The high school my dad went to is gone. Like all these people I know and communities I know, they are gone. So when you comment, if you do, I know most of my friends don't, when you make comments like, oh, they're rich, it's fine, or oh, the Democrats, or oh, the Republicans, there is a place for all of those conversations, but these are real people. These are real people who are really hurting. And it's not about the stuff. I mean, you and I think about it. If we were going to leave right now, what would you take? I mean, my aunt, she's so funny. She goes, I only took 2 underwear. I thought I'd be back. You know what she wanted to go back to get? Her bathing suit. So she could go swim in the ocean. I was like, okay. She's so practical. It's not like the fancy things. It's, you know, the picture from your grandma or your dad's little note he wrote to you that you have framed. Like those are the things that are completely irreplaceable. And you guys, there's so much power in prayer. God doesn't cause bad things to happen to us, but he does allow them. We have free will, and sometimes the things that happen to us are natural consequences of other people. And I know that's a really hard concept, especially for people that don't believe in the Lord or are angry with the Lord. And by the way, if you're angry with the Lord, that's a good sign, because you have emotion towards it. All kinds of hard things happen in our life. God never said that when you are a believer, it'll be easy. It actually says it'll get worse. It says, consider it pure joy, brothers and sisters, when you face persecution. That's one of the verses in there. This life is hard. what do we get to take with us? The relationships, the love we have for the Lord. Just pray for these people. Pray for their hearts to be turned to Him. I have seen so many, all kinds, wealthy, poor, helping each other as neighbors. That's the kind of thing you want to see, right? Pray for this fire to stop. There is power in our prayers, you guys. And I do believe that the Lord is trying to call us as a nation, and really as a world, but as a nation. This nation was founded on biblical beliefs, to come back to Him. It's amazing what will happen if we do that. So anyway, I want to tell you a really funny story real quick. So about the Palisades. Okay, so Jennifer Garner, I'm going to throw her under the bus. She lives in the Palisades. All the paparazzi do not show she lives in the Palisades. I call her my BFF. She has no idea who I am. I see her all the time in the Palisades and with her kids, and just her character. I love her. And she must have some agreement with the paparazzi because they completely leave her alone, but she allows them to take photos of her going into her church. Okay. And so her church burned down in the Palisades. And one day I got my nails done by myself, and I was looking all these people's gardens, like the plants that grow there are amazing. I'm like, looking at the roses and flowers, whatever. She comes whizzing by me, and the only reason I noticed is because all the paparazzi vehicles were out there. The second she goes inside the church, they back completely off. So there's some agreement, which I love. Thank you, paparazzi, for being respectful. And she always gives them a photo or whatever. And I'm literally like, my BFF went by me and I missed my BFF. How is this possible? So anyway, it's like things like that. Like, you just see people everywhere. James Cameron sitting at my favorite cafe with his AA book and his AA sponsor for hours, and a little kid in Spider-Man came up to him and he gave him a high five. Like, that's literally the community. Arnold Schwarzenegger, my grandfather used to talk to him almost every day in town at Gelson's, which burned down before he was the governor. Like, that is this community, the mix of have and have not, which is probably the wrong term. Like, my biggest fear, not fear, I know it'll happen, is that the sweetness of that community, which was mostly 1920s to 1950s built with a few new ones, is going to become this like super designed monstrosity of a community because so many homes burned down. You know how communities have this quaintness and sweetness to them? It really was this hidden little gem. So anyway, thank you for listening to my rambling. Let's pray for our people.
I hope that today's podcast was a blessing to you. We appreciate you over here at Live Your Life Out Loud. If you could go follow us, share this podcast, and give us a review, it would greatly help us get the word out. Have a wonderful week.